Hello and welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation with me, your host Owen James, a channel that brings you all your latest Rangers news, guys. We're going to talk possible farewell for Jose Cifuentes. We're going to talk Conor Coady and what's going on with that deal. Some new information as regards Conor Coady. And we're also going to talk about yet another winger. Like we've had Gassama. We've had, obviously, the guy from Crystal Palace whose name I can't remember, Raki Sain or whatever his name was again. There's been so many players that have been linked in those wide areas, and we're going to reflect a little bit on that. We've got another name for you that's been mentioned on a few different sites. We'll talk a bit more about him. But let's start off with Jose Cifuentes. Yes, the missing Ecuadorian, the man who went to Greece last year, the man who was apparently a game changer, the man who was apparently a generational talent, the man who was going to change everything for Rangers. He was the missing link. He was the man who would go box to box. He was the man who would do everything, according to Mr. Michael Beale, who we now know was, and I think, to quote Father Ted, a gobshite. Or was it Father Jack? Father Jack, a gobshite. Jose Cifuentes, look, I've got to say, absolutely was a letdown. Was not the player that was advertised, was not what we didn't think, what we thought we were getting and what we actually got were two completely different things. And then obviously you had all the stories regarding Jose Cifuentes and his alleged fear of the Glasgow weather. I mean, I'm not being funny, but he went from LA, where it's sunny a lot of the time, in California. California's, a very warm place, so I'm told. And he came to Scotland. I'm not being funny, but what did he expect? About Scotland, about Britain in total. This is not a tropical climate. It is a climate that gets very cold in the winter and very wet through 2/3, 3/4 of the year. So I'm not 100% sure what he was expecting. I think, I remember watching a sketch by Billy Connolly, and someone said, to Billy Connolly, apparently, it rains in Scotland. And he said, of course it fucking rains. It's not the Pyrenees. It is wet. So I don't know what he was expecting when it came to the weather. I genuinely don't. Perhaps he was given, I don't know, perhaps he was showing pictures of Nice or the south of France. I don't know. But there we go. Anyway, look, he came, he saw, he definitely didn't conquer. And he headed out on loan. And there was a lot of hope, I think, amongst the Rangers fans, that he would be snapped up at the end of his loan spell by Aris and that he wouldn't have to return to the club. However, Aris were given a deadline by which to obviously decide whether they wanted to see Cifu or whether they didn't want Cifu. And obviously the decision was they didn't want him because that deadline was allowed to pass. And he has returned to Glasgow. Now, look, according to stories that are emanating from his agent, he wants to come to Rangers and he wants to come back and he wants to try, apparently. But the weather ain't changing, Cifu. It ain't getting any warmer here, although it's very hot at the moment. So that's what his agent's saying, allegedly. However, it has now been reported by a number of sources that Rangers are ready to rip up Jose Cifuentes' contract and basically cancel the last 2 years of his deal, pay him up and allow him to leave on a free. If this was the case, apparently he will return to the MLS. That is the story, that once his contract is cancelled with Rangers, that he will then go back to Major League Soccer in the United States of America. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, if that's the case, Owen, and Major League Soccer clubs want him, why don't we hold out for a transfer fee? Why don't we hold out for, some money for the player? Well, I think the worry is from Rangers that they won't get the money, that they won't get what they want for the player, they won't get anything for the player. The MLS clubs are willing to take him on a free, but are not willing to take him for any sort of cash at this point in his career. And as such, Rangers are worried they're going to get stuck with him. I think that is the way we look at it. They're going to get stuck with a player they don't want. They're going to get stuck with a player that realistically isn't going to contribute to the team. Now, listening and kind of reading, and like I said on the video yesterday, you've got to take everything that's said with a little pinch of salt because it's the media, and the media makes shit up. That's just life. But no, I think maybe it is that Russell Martin's looked at him. Maybe Russell Martin's seen what Jose Cifuentes can bring and decided, look, he ain't for me. He genuinely ain't for me, guys. Let him go. Let's pay him up. Let's pay him off, and let's get rid. Look, nothing against the lad. Absolutely nothing against the lad. Don't dislike the lad. Don't hate the lad. He came. he didn't agree with him. He didn't play well. He didn't settle in. And look, we all know that Glasgow is not for everybody. That Rangers is not for everybody. You know, Rangers is a very tough club to play at. And you can come with the best stats and the best ability in the world, but suddenly you come to Rangers and it all falls apart because you can't cope with the atmosphere, you can't cope with the pressure, you can't cope with the old firm, you can't cope with whatever. And it appears that Cifu is very much in that can't cope with it kind of category. He last played obviously in that Betis game away, that fantastic victory that saw us through in the Europa League. But, you know, I think it is time to cut. I think, look, realistically, yes, I'd love to get a fee for the player. Of course I would. You know, I hate seeing our players move on for nothing and move for free. But, you know, realistically, perhaps you've just got to, with some of these players, cut our coat, cut it, say, look, you didn't do it. We're not going to get any money for you. See you later. You know, maybe that's the best plan. You know, maybe that's what Stelwell, Purdy, Marathe have come up with as the best solution for this player. You know, maybe they look at certain players and just say, look, you ain't going to get anything for them. They're just genuinely not good. Maybe Cifu falls into that category. You know, maybe that's what we're looking at with this one. Guys, let me know your thoughts on Cifuentes in the comments down below. Right, let's move it along a little bit. Let's talk a little bit of Conor Coady. Now, obviously, all the smart money seemed to be on Conor Coady coming to Rangers. Everybody seemed to be saying that it was a done deal. Everyone seemed to be saying that Rangers would pay a small transfer fee, secure Conor Coady, because Leicester wanted to allow players to leave after their relegation from the Premier League, and Conor Coady was one of those players who was going to be allowed to go. There was a seeming division in the fan base with those saying he's too old, we don't want him, he's too old, and others saying that he's exactly what we need. You know, he's a leader, he's a communicator, he's got international experience with England, he's played in the very highest level in the Premier League. You know, he's going to bring that ball-playing centre-half ability, you know, like Giga. So, you know, bring him in, get him in here, and he's not going to cost an arm and a leg. You know, give him a couple of years on his contract. I'm sure he'll do very well for us. So, you know, there's two schools of thought, and it all seemed to be swimmingly going along, and it all seemed to be happening, and it seemed to be the fact that we all expected Coady to be announced ASAP. However, it hasn't happened. Is this because maybe Rangers are genuinely not interested, and this is just the media putting two and two together because he's been mentioned previously with something else, and it's 5 rather than 4? I don't know. Look. However, it's been suggested down here that Rangers are still interested in Conor Coady. This is in the Leicester papers down here, in the local papers. And that Rangers are keen to sign Conor Coady. And look, personally, I've given you my views. I think he'll be a good signing. I think he'll bring leadership. I think he'll be the communicator, the organiser at the back. I think alongside Giga, he'd be fantastic. Or alongside Fernandez, he'd be fantastic. I think he could be a captain as well. You know, he's much more of a leader. He has that leadership capability. But, you know, unlike a lot of the other Rangers transfers, you know, we've seen a lot of other Rangers transfers. The rumour gets pushed out there and the player signs. The rumour gets pushed out there, the player signs, which is fantastic, guys. It's like a breath of fresh air. You know, under the old board, we had rumour after rumour after rumour after rumour after rumour. And then someone was linked. And then about a month later, maybe, possibly, just perhaps after 6 weeks, something might finally get done because of the inefficiencies and incompetence of the old board. However, it now appears that we are working in a very different environment where the transfer targets are identified by Thelwell and Purdy, and literally, once that kind of leaks out within a week or so, the guy gets signed. That seems to be the way it works. Coady seems to have come completely kind of the opposite way, and, you know, he hasn't been signed and it's not happening. Now that there appears to be a possible explanation for Conor Coady's lack of transfer activity, that is that Leicester are waiting upon getting a new manager. It looks like Martí Cifuentes, the former QPR manager, will be appointed as the new Leicester City manager within the next few days. And apparently Leicester are waiting for Cifuentes to come in before making any decision on any of their players. That is why Coady has not moved anywhere yet. So, you know, Martí Cifuentes, obviously, could be the new manager of Leicester, ex-Ruby, ex-Santandreu, ex-Hospitalet, ex-Sanjifud, ex-AAB, ex-Hammarabi, ex-QPR. Martí Cifuentes, obviously, who is Spanish. So, you know, there's going to be a way that he wants to play. You know, he's again going to want ball-playing players. Maybe he wants to keep Coady. So it does seem to me that there is kind of a delay in this deal because of the fact that Leicester are waiting to see what their new manager wants. And I think if Martí Cifuentes comes in, sees the situation, says, no, look, Conor's not got a future with the club, then I think he will be allowed to leave, and Rangers will be, I think, in pole position to take him. But it does appear that any move very much depends on what the new Leicester manager says once he is finally appointed. So guys, let me know your thoughts on the Conor Coady situation. Right, let's finish off with a link. Another one. Yes, another bloody winger. So we had the link to the Wolfsburger winger yesterday, Ballo, Tiene Ballo. We had the link to Gassama, which is confusing for me. I thought Gassama was done. It appears that, I don't know, it hasn't been done yet. This is a new name. Certainly a new name. Abu Kamara. Abu Kamara. I was about to go down there. Abu al-Baghdadi died like a dog. You know, the Trump thing. Hilarious. Anyway, look, yes, Abu Kamara, winger. Guy who obviously has been linked with Rangers. Again, another winger. It does appear that Rangers are very much at this moment in time focusing on bringing in wide players. Guys, we need a centre forward as soon as possible. I know Dessers, unfortunately, is back in training. I know Hamza, thank God, is back in training. But we need a proper centre forward. Anyway, so wingers seem to be the kind of flavour of the day. I think what we're going for. Looking at wingers. We want wingers. We want wingers. So Abu Kamara is the latest name. The latest cab off the rank, so to speak. Here he is. Abu Bakar Kamara. He's called Bakar. Abu Bakar Kamara is a young player. I mean, obviously that's a given there. He is a young player. He is 21 years old. He's just over 6 foot. He was born in London, England. He has English citizenship, but he also has citizenship for Sierra Leone. He is a Sierra Leone international. Now, I know what you're thinking. African player, shit the AFCON. We could lose him if Sierra Leone qualified. That's obviously the downside of having African players. We know that. Like I said, he has got dual citizenship. He is a right winger, but again, he's one of those inverted right wingers like Tierney and like so many seem to be these days, coming off the right on his left foot. As we discussed yesterday with the left winger coming onto his right foot. So, we kind of saw that, didn't we? And Gassama, I think, is very similar to that. He's currently with Hull City. Like I said, he's out of contract, with Hull City. Do you know what? Guys, if I mention the contract, he's ex-Norwich. Why is our obsession with bloody Norwich players? We seem to have an obsession with them, don't we? It seems to be that all of a sudden Norwich players are the flavour of the month. Yeah, he's under contract until 2028, so he still has 2-3 years on his deal, which means he will cost, obviously, a transfer fee. He's ex-Portsmouth, ex-Norwich, ex-Hull City. So all his experiences come within the English League One and the English Championship. So again, it's another player from England. It does seem that is the area we are focusing on. And I think, look, people obviously quite rightly point back to the Ross Wilson days and point back to the awful signings from the English Championship. But guys, this is not Ross Wilson. This is Kevin Thelwell. This is not Ross Wilson. This is Dan Purdy. These are different people. These are people who've got track records for spotting talent, bringing in players, Beto, for instance, to Everton. So, look, we've got to kind of give them their due, give them their head, let them get on with it. So, at Portsmouth, he made 52 appearances, scoring 10 goals and 11 assists. With Norwich, he came through their youth system, under 18s, 30 appearances, 12 goals, 3 assists. Under 21s was kind of where he made his mark and kind of shouted and signalled to Norwich that they needed to put me to the first team, where he made 50 appearances, scoring 31 goals with 7 assists, before making 6 first-team appearances at Norwich. Like I said, he's now with Hull City, where he's made 37 appearances, scoring 5 goals and getting 3 assists. So you can see he's gone through that Norwich youth system. He went on loan to Portsmouth. So those games that he played for Portsmouth were loan games again. Then he joined Hull City at the end in season 24-25. That was last season. Hull paid €5.35 million for the player. 5.35 million euro. So 5.35 million euro is around about. Let's have a quick look. Let's do a bit conversion here very, very quickly. It's around 4.6 million, 4.5 million, call it. Okay, so that's what they paid for him. So I think Hull will be looking to get their money back for him at very least. So you're looking at perhaps a £4.5 million player here in Abu Kamara. So it does appear that Rangers have got an interest there in this young man. Now, what can I tell you about Abu Kamara? So he's a young player. developing player, fits the trading model, fits the type of player that Rangers seem to be going for on top of the older players like Rothwell and like Coady, for example. He is currently, obviously, like I said, for Hull City. His background, we know. He has his key features are his pace, his dribbling ability, his ability to score and assist, and the ability to play as a left winger or an attacking midfielder. In fact, I did a bit of research. He can play left wing, right wing, second striker, centre forward. He can play in any of the forward attacking positions. You know, Rangers are interested in him, and there could be a deal to be done, and even a cut price deal to be done. Why? Because Hull are in financial difficulty. Hull have financial issues like Sheffield Wednesday. So it looks like, with the Kamara deal, we're picking over the bones of a struggling team, and that's how we're getting these players a reasonable price. It's good scouting, it's good awareness of what's going on around you. What are Kamara's strengths? Well, he's known for his speed and his ability to take on defenders, making him a really big threat on that wide position. And that's something Rangers need out wide. They need people who can go at people, beat them, go round them, come inside them, create. The low block is tricky. And players like Kamara, like Ballo, like Gassama are all players who can help us to overcome that low block. He's shown a knack for both scoring goals and providing assists, evidenced by his performances at Portsmouth and at Hull, where he scored goals, obviously, in those teams. He can play left wing, attacking midfielder, even as a striker. Like I said, he's that valuable asset. He is that hybrid player, that player that can play in multiple different positions comfortably, which is something that modern managers are looking for. He's actually quite good on his head as well, so being over 6 foot, he's a useful threat from set pieces. Again, that's something that Rangers lack. His height and speed, he brings those things to Rangers. Again, one of his weaknesses is his consistency. His consistency of performance, like a lot of young players. And that's just kind of what young players are. That's perhaps, why Rangers have looked at the likes of Rothwell, looked at the likes of Conor Coady, because the older players get the more veteran, they get the more consistency there is to performance. The younger a player is, the more likely there is to inconsistency. That is, again, coachable, developable, and all positive, I think. Russell Martin will be confident that he can work with Abu Kamara if he is the player that Rangers do want to bring in. But it's another very interesting link for Rangers, and it's a fascinating time, isn't it? It's amazing to be linked with so many different players, and it's great to talk about. It's great to talk about. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching Glasgow Rangers Nation. If you've enjoyed the content, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And remember always, guys, look, we're always here every single day for you, bringing you all the latest. But what makes this channel is not me talking shit for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 8 minutes, an hour, half an hour. It's you guys, your thoughts, your comments. This channel, fan-driven, independent, not beholden to anybody, and it's your channel, guys. Thanks for watching. Speak to you soon.